I'm meteorologist Jason Caterina on AM 560, The Answer.
Get the latest weather, traffic, and news updates online at 560theanswer.com.
This hourly segment is brought to you by The Real Story with Jeannie Ives, powered by Breakthrough Ideas, Sunday evening at 7 on AM 560, The Answer.
Now, from the Signature Bank Studios, this is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft on AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan Proft here. So while you had those goons and droogs and cretins invade that city's church in St. Paul, Minnesota, screaming and using profanity and asserting white supremacy and calling of the parishioners and calling people names and so on and so forth. And Don Lemon on scene to chronicle it all. Well, that was going on. In other houses of worship, these sorts of things were being said. Holy Trinity Lutheran in the Twin Cities.
On this baptism of our Lord Sunday, the 41st day of federal occupation, may the gospel also remind us that in our baptismal covenant we enter into relationship with our neighbor near but also afar. And currently, all of these relationships have made their demand so clear. We are demanded to protect our neighbors by tracking and following those who kidnap them, by connecting and building trust with our neighbors and finding places of sanctuary, providing support and aid to all those forced to hide, and all those whose families have been attacked, whether in money or food or child care, to harbor and guide to safety all of God's people under immediate threat, and to care for the children left behind.
Yeah, keep it together, Padre. 41st day of federal occupation, kidnapping, the language, the no person is illegal lingo of the open borders, abolish ICE, lawless left. It's like hiding Anne Frank in the attic, right? In New Hampshire, a bishop for the Episcopal Church of New Hampshire donned the cloth of Martin Niemöller. It's pathetic.
I have told the clergy of the Episcopal Diocese of New Hampshire that we may be entering into that same witness. And I've asked them to get their affairs in order, to make sure they have their wills written. Because it may be that now is no longer the time for statements, but for us with our bodies to stand between the powers of this world and the most vulnerable.
Because what you see with respect to immigration law enforcement is just another illustration of MAGA's push to, well, in Jim Clyburn's words, reestablish something as close to slavery as we can get. South Carolina Representative Jim Clyburn, Biden whisperer on firing line.
In fact, I am convinced that whoever put January 6th together used a roadmap that came right out of this era.
How far do you think the current MAGA Republican Party, because you say Proud Boys, which are different from run-of-the-mill MAGA.
Absolutely.
How far do you think MAGA Republicans, and you even referenced Donald Trump as the leader of the MAGA Republicans.
Sure.
I mean, when you reference the echoes to history, how far do you think, or are you warning that they're willing to go?
All the way.
What do you mean by that? What do you mean by all the way? Because you write at one point in the book, the MAGA Republicans and their supporters who want to make America great again want to be remaking it in the image of the antebellum era. I just want to be clear. Are you saying you think they want to reinstate slavery?
No. They wish to get us back as close to slavery as they can possibly get us to without violating, because the Constitution they can't do it. Jim Crow? Yes.
So you think they would reinstitute Jim Crow?
Absolutely. And I think the Supreme Court is well on the way to doing that.
So the Constitution would inhibit MAGA from reinstituting slavery, but not Jim Crow. A curious argument on many levels. For comment, in consideration of something perhaps more life-affirming and sensible, please be joined, as always, by Bob Woodson, founder and president of the Woodson Center, author of A Pathway to American Renewal, Red, White, and Black, Volume 2, and also his piece in the Wall Street Journal that we talked about a good bit yesterday, calling for an American rejuvenation within Black America, something you should check out, and I posted on X. Bob, thanks for joining us, as always. Appreciate it.
So it's always a pleasure to be with you, Dan.
So, Jim Clyburn, these men of the cloth, everything is 1940s Germany, 1850s America. That's what those individuals say that we're all up against.
Yeah, remember, Clyburn was the first to run up to New York and support Mondami, a socialist, without recognizing that it was the government of the United States that supported slavery and Jim Crow. It was the government's programs of the 60s that destroyed the family, that separated work from income. It was the government's intervention in the marketplace that created the separated households and created a kind of decline that we're witnessing. So Jim Clyburn is part of the race grievance industry and has always been. They offer no solutions. They just profit from division. But he does not speak for the majority of Black Americans. That 60% of Blacks do not believe racism is the principal source of their problems. 80% of Black Americans polled do not support defund the police the way Clyburn and some of his supporters do. So there's a huge bifurcation in the Black community, and Jim Clyburn does not speak for anybody except the race grievance industry.
And so do you think that, like, the self-styled civil rights leaders and the Black members of Congress that get most of the attention from a media that is there to give them and anybody else on the left the attention, that they're sort of a paper tiger, that bubbling below the surface, you're getting the clean break from the choices that were made 60 years ago, because the people on the ground across the country are starting to really internalize what those choices have meant, what they have wrought, the consequences, and they want to chart a different course.
Yes, Dan. In our publications, we challenge the civil rights leadership and Nicole Hannah-Jones and all that with facts. In fact, in talking about under Jim Crow, in one sense, low-income Black Americans were better off under Jim Crow than they are today, in many ways. I give examples of how there were 5 Black high schools at the turn of the century in New York, in Baltimore, in Atlanta, and in Washington, D.C. They had crumbling buildings, use textbooks half of the budgets of white schools, yet every one of those black schools out-tested every white school in those cities at the turn of the century. Elderly people could walk safely without fear of being assaulted by their grandchildren. Kids were not shot in their cribs the way they are today. More blacks are killed today in 1 year by other blacks than were killed by the Klan in 40 years. What does Clyburn and his group have to say about that reality?
The legacies of systemic racism, right? I mean, that's their go-to for all of the persistent ills of the modern era. It's just blame it on the legacy of racist institutions, government-sponsored racist institutions like Jim Crow and slavery. That's their play, right?
Yeah, but I had a chance to debate this with Hawk Newman, head of Black Lives Matter in New York.
Oh, yeah.
And your viewers, your listeners can go on YouTube and see that. And what tripped him up is that I kept saying he was ready to confront my argument, but I made him confront facts, like I just shared with you. And there are other examples that I gave from history. How right today they're having middle school kids in Baltimore write essays on the 30 people who were lynched in Baltimore. But the kids are not writing about how in 1868, when 1,000 blacks were fired from the railroad, they formed their own railroad and hired 1,000 people and successfully ran a railroad that hired white employees too, from Maine into Baltimore. So the contrast is amazing that what we do is present examples of resilience in the face of oppression. In fact, one of our scholars revealed that at the turn of the century, Jewish leaders and scholars came from Europe to visit with Booker T. Washington and Tuskegee to learn from how Black America was responding with resilience in the face of oppression so they could help confront fascism in Europe. And so this is a history that our kids are not being taught.
In your piece in the Journal, I thought it was a useful vehicle, a provocative one, but a useful one, just to get people to stop and think for a second and maybe generate some conversation, even if it's pointed. We said call for a 1-year moratorium on blaming racism for anything. Not that because it doesn't exist, but just because it's not central to the issue. And it seems to me like if that could get broader amplification, it may get people to stop and think about what is central to the problems of the day. I wonder what kind of feedback you're getting from that.
I'm getting excellent. I had 570 comments on in response to the column. But the other thing that conservatives must do is we must do more than just write white papers and whine about what the left is doing.
Yeah.
I think it's important for them to invest in these neighborhood programs that are American values in action. Values are caught, they're not taught. And our grassroots leaders are able to redeem individuals and rebuild communities on the foundation of our founding principles. But they need support, not just money from conservatives, but also scholars need to come into the community like Jason Riley did. Jason Riley spent a day at the Piney Wood School in Piney Wood, Mississippi, and he wrote a stellar column about what he saw there. A 116-year-old black Christian boarding school that only takes kids on scholarships from some of the most challenged neighborhoods and some of the most troubled families, and 100% of them go on to college. St. Mary's in New Orleans is another black Christian school. There are examples of leaders who are acting with moral clarity, but also they are demonstrating by their actions what values and action. So more of our conservative scholars need to cite them in their writings. They need to go and listen and learn from and validate the actions being taken to rebuild our inner cities and minorities. Only then will we see change.
I mean, do you think, like, just going to what some of those men of the cloth are saying from the pulpit in response to immigration enforcement operations in Minneapolis and elsewhere, do you think we have what your friend and mine, Shelby Steele, called the cultural deference? That still is something that is a hurdle to clear, this idea that people of goodwill on both the left and the right are still too deferential to those who are, destroyers of free societies, most notably America, since that's what we're talking about. We're just too deferential to the loudest and the most sentimental of the arguments being made.
I think what we must do is offer an alternative voice. That's why what the Woodson Center is doing, it has 3,500 low-income grassroots leaders in 39 states. Some of them support maybe thousands of people. Well, that's a powerful voice, but the qualities that make them effective also makes them invisible because they're not whining and complaining. So what we've got to do is we're trying to put together a public event where those grassroots patriots can speak with a single voice and command the kind of attention that the left does with a George Floyd. We need the moral equivalent of something that sparks the kind of outpouring that I know is latent in the hearts and souls of Americans. Americans are looking for a place to reposit their dreams and their aspirations. They want to unify, but we are allowing the left to occupy this space. But we need to do more than just complain about what they are doing. What we're working on at the Woodson Center is providing the vehicles for these grassroots patriots to speak for themselves and affirm the values of this nation.
Bob Woodson, founder and president of the Woodson Center, author of A Pathway to American Renewal, Red, White, and Black, Volume 2. Volume 2 is out. Bob Woodson, thank you as always. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And that was Bob Woodson. I'm Dan Proft, Chicago's Morning Answer.
This is the morning show more Chicago radio listeners are choosing. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
Listen, I'm going to be straight with you. Pain doesn't just hurt your body, it cripples your life. I know this because I've seen it with people I care about. If joint pain is holding you back, start the new year by doing something different. There's a way to get real relief without surgery and without putting your life on pause. But you have to take that first step and contact my